Mountaineer Nation, how about it? Your West Virginia Mountaineers bowl eligible here in the first week of November. It's been a long time since we've been able to say that as Mountaineer fans. So impressive victory here. West Virginia comes away from this one 37-7 over BYU here in the ninth game of the WVU football season to move to 6-3 overall and now have 4 wins in conference as well, 4-2 in conference. So positive record on both ends overall and in conference play. And we're excited to talk about this West Virginia victory and this positive season they have going right now here on the West Virginia postgame show on the Voice of College Football Network. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one. Encourage you drop your thoughts there in the chat. We'll touch on your comments throughout the stream here, whether you're tuned in on the West Virginia channel or the Big 12 Voice of College Football channel, and ask you to subscribe to either one of those as we'll simulcasting across both of those channels here. A very positive outcome for the Mountaineers here in this one, as West Virginia does get the victory 37-7 over BYU. See several people already in here. We got Silas in here, got Timothy Green in here. Good to see you guys as always. Kenny says, "What a win! What a win indeed, man! Great way to put it there, Kenny, for sure. Love to see it, man." Silas says, "Who wants to go give Oklahoma a third straight loss next weekend?" Hey, I love the positivity already. It's going to be a showdown now for sure. West Virginia 6-3, Oklahoma 7-2, and of course, they're, I guess you could say, reeling a little bit now. 2 straight losses, lost to Kansas last week, and then of course lost to Oklahoma State, and what very well could be the final Bedlam game ever. So sets up a showdown in Norman next week, and West Virginia is going to go down there and definitely give them all they got. We saw them do it back in 2021, and this team is certainly better than the team West Virginia had back in 21. So West Virginia is really going to put all their cards on the table and, give Oklahoma a great shot, I think, Silas, and I'm looking forward to it, man, especially got to feel excited and positive heading into it after this result here, a 30-point win in this game for West Virginia, and it's a game where they did something that a lot of people have said they haven't really done a lot in the Neil Brown era, and that's, kind of keep your foot on the gas. And when you look like there's a game that you got a chance to pull away in, you actually do that. And I was so excited to see that happen in this game here. Phil Porter, appreciate you tuning in and chiming in as well. Echo similar statements to what Silas says there. He says, "Let's keep the hammer down and go out to Norman next week. Beat the Sooners." Indeed, Phil. That's what we're hoping for, man. That's what we're hoping for. Going to be a big one now, but sets up for a good game there. Could be a good road game for West Virginia, but we know West Virginia got a big win at home in this one, and it was the penultimate home game of the 2023 West Virginia football season. So that means you got one more chance to check out the West Virginia Mountaineers at home as they wrap up the season there on Senior Day against Cincinnati here in a couple of weeks. And if you want a great chance to get tickets to that final West Virginia home game, we've got a great deal you can grab here on the Voice of College Football Network, and that's through Ticket Smarter, where you can save on your next trip to the big game. Get $10 off an order of $100 or more by using the promo code BIG, or get $20 off an order of $300 or more using the promo code BIG20. Use the promo code as much as you'd like. Ticket Smarter gives you the most competitive prices on the secondary market, and your purchase is safe and guaranteed. Get in the game with TicketSmarter.com and the TicketSmarter mobile app, and remember the promo codes BIG and BIG20. Think smarter, Ticket Smarter. And there's also a link there in the chat for you to directly find that, though, but definitely use those promo codes if you're looking for tickets. And, West Virginia fans going to be looking for tickets for that final home game now. I think should be a great turnout for West Virginia, and hopefully we get a positive crowd there heading on the road to Norman next week, as that will be an absolute showdown, as some people there have mentioned. And great comment here by Silas. Jaheim White is good at football. Indeed, man. I think I made a video on our channel on the Country Roads webcast about a couple of months ago, I guess 2 or 3 months ago now, right before the season started, about a month out, asking if West Virginia had found another true freshman phenom, a potential breakout player. And I think emphatically the answer to that question that I titled that video with is yes, indeed, they have. Jaheim White is going to be very special throughout his West Virginia career, and him and CJ Donaldson are a very formidable 1-2 punch there in the backfield. And Jaheim White, you guys know that follow me from the Country Roads webcast, which you guys can find us on YouTube on any podcast platform you like. Subscribe to us as well. I host the CRW podcast, a couple episodes a week, and the CRW Hoops podcast, and we put out a ton of West Virginia sports content on YouTube in addition to those long form podcast episodes. But Jaheim White's a guy that I raved about, really since he signed, and I've said, time and time again, he's probably my favorite player on this roster currently, and I've been waiting for him to explode onto the scene, and he really has here in recent weeks. And he really came so close to, breaking a, 50, 60, 70-yard run in this game, but he kept getting big chunks, 20, 30-yard gains, 15-yard gains, 12-yard gains, and ended up getting well over 140 rushing yards. Him and CJ Donaldson, both over 100 yards, and West Virginia's run game is really looking great the past 2 weeks. And that's still, we got to remember, West Virginia's rushing game is doing this without a full strength offensive line. They really haven't had that since earlier in the season. Last game, they got it for about 19 snaps. Then Doug Nestor was injured, so he missed this game. You were without Doug Nestor. You went a few plays without Brandon Yates. He was able to come back into this game, luckily. But West Virginia hopefully will get Doug Nestor back for Oklahoma as well, and they could potentially have their full strength offensive line heading into that one. That would be great news for West Virginia, but Jaheim White is looking great in the backfield for sure there. Great point, Silas, and appreciate everyone there in the comments that's throwing out such great points, and encourage you guys continue to do that. Throw your thoughts there in the comments on this West Virginia football game, the remainder of the season. Anything you want to talk about there, as we're excited to close out this season, hopefully positively, as West Virginia is now bowl eligible following this 37-7 win over BYU. And we talked last week about, cash and tickets, that you had the over 4.5 line that DraftKings had West Virginia's season win total at. You cashed that last week. This week, if you had West Virginia's conference wins on the over, you can cash that as well. That was at 3.5 today. West Virginia won their 4th conference game. So West Virginia, proving the naysayers wrong all season, predict us to finish last in the Big 12 conference. That's not going to be true. We've, hit the over on the season win total now, over on the conference win total now, and just continuing to play well these past few weeks. And it's really great to see, and I'm loving it here as a Mountaineer fan, as I know you all are also. But let me take a swig of my coffee here, and then I'll get into some of my notes from the game, and of course, catch up on some of your all's comments in between as well as we continue throughout the stream here. Appreciate you guys being in here live. And if you are in here live, or even if you're watching this on a playback, hit that thumbs up button. It'll really help us a ton. It helps this thing hit the YouTube algorithm, and helps its performance and future videos performances here on the channel as well. All right, but getting into some of my notes to start the game, obviously, heading into the game, we learned, I think it was Thursday, that BYU would be dealing with some injuries heading into this one. Obviously, the main one being without the quarterback, Keaton Slovis, but they were also without their wide receiver, Lassiter. I believe they were missing another wide receiver whose name's slipping my mind right now. Left guard was out for BYU. Really had some depth issues on the defensive line as well. So, when I heard that heading into the game, I thought West Virginia could maybe run on them, and that indeed proved to be true with BYU dealing with multiple injuries. And I think West Virginia thought that they could, move the ball on this team also, and you saw that evidenced by the opening coin toss. BYU loses the coin toss. West Virginia elects to receive the football and try and jump out to a fast start, and we're able to do just that with a good opening drive. It was pretty efficient and covered over took up over 5 minutes of time. Ended up, of course, ending in a touchdown. And just to kind of talk a little bit about that opening drive for the Mountaineers, first play of the game, I thought it was a well-designed end around to Rodney Gallagher III, and he gained 3 yards out of what looked like it was going to be nothing, and he showed that shiftiness that we've seen from him time and time again this season, and he's just continuing to play better and better as this season progresses. Then you get a shot play to Preston Fox on the second play of the game, but you get defensive pass interference on, a little slot fade to Preston Fox there that didn't quite connect, but you do get the pass interference. Then CJ Donaldson gets into the game, gains 12 yards on his first carry, which was on the subsequent 2nd and 10 there, followed by an early false start penalty against West Virginia, which unfortunately was kind of a theme throughout this game. If you're looking, for anything to nitpick about, it's certainly, a little bit of a lack of discipline, I guess you could say, or maybe the officials were just happy with the flags. That was also something you could make a case for in this game. But West Virginia definitely more penalized in this game than they have been in pretty much any other game throughout this season, and they had done a good job in recent weeks getting back to, committing few penalties, but it didn't hurt them in this game, obviously. But got to get back to the basics when it comes to being more disciplined there, especially with this game coming up against Oklahoma. You want to get that back down to underneath that magic number of 5 penalties or less that West Virginia had been having such success with earlier in the season. But I digress on that. Then you get a nice ball from Garrett Green to Cole Taylor on a corner route on that 1st and 15 following that first false start penalty, but Cole Taylor can't quite hang on. That was when, of course, following that, you get the injury that I talked about a little bit earlier to Brandon Yates, which luckily, it looked bad initially, and I was worried because West Virginia continues to get hit with injuries on that offensive line, it seems like, but luckily he would return, not long thereafter and finish out this game for the Mountaineers. CJ's second effort results in a 4th-and-1 conversion for West Virginia when it looked like he was going to be stopped behind the line there as West Virginia was going for a 4th-and-1 in their own territory there to begin the game there on their opening drive. Then Garrett Green finds Preston Fox on a crossing route on a nice play-action bootleg. They've been utilizing that a lot the past couple of weeks, getting Garrett Green out on the perimeter, and I thought that it's been very beneficial for the Mountaineers, and that put them into the red zone on that first drive. Then they go back to Preston Fox again. He comes in motion and then hits a little hitch route and makes a nice move to pick up a few yards. Take a shot to the end zone for Traylon Ray. Another defensive pass interference is called on BYU. Then CJ on a toss play. West Virginia gets some extra blockers in there. CJ is stopped right at the goal line initially, but able to be shoved in. And how about Sully Weedman, a reserve offensive lineman for West Virginia, making a play there, bumping CJ into the end zone and ending West Virginia's first drive with a touchdown to put them up 7-0, and they would never look back from there, obviously. So that's kind of the summary I had on the first drive for West Virginia. Thought it was, the second consecutive game the Mountaineers have started a game fast, and that's something we had complained about earlier in the season. They were winning games despite the fact that they were having slow starts, but they've apparently found the antidote, at least in recent weeks, and hopefully that continues because second consecutive game with a fast start here for the Mountaineers in this one. Try and catch up on some of your all's comments here before I continue on with some of my notes here. How about Beanie? This dude was a stud on defense, Timothy Green says. Yeah, he was, man. I can think of, just off the top of my head, multiple pass breakups, continues to make plays there. I think he came into the game leading the nation in pass breakups and certainly added to that tally in this one. Continues to be, one of the better transfer additions West Virginia brought in this offseason and what an impact he's made on the Mountaineer defense. And shout out to the Mountaineer defense. The past couple of games, they've been, taking a bit of flack, I guess you could say. Despite West Virginia, winning, they've had to win in shootouts, when they have won. And then, of course, the games against Houston and Oklahoma State were also shootouts. But this game, I think that they really showed up and showed out. Some people may say it's some of the injuries that BYU's offense had, played a part in it. And maybe so, but they certainly still went out there and made plays when they had to. There were times it looked like BYU was going to score in this game. We'll get to a segment here when that happens shortly, when Aubrey Burks makes a play. And time and time again, West Virginia was in the backfield, and we saw a bit of the defense that we saw earlier in the season, I think, come back to life in this game with West Virginia, really causing some havoc, getting in the opposing offense's backfield a lot, getting a lot of TFLs and getting some pass rush. And that's something that we've been, clamoring to see as Mountaineer fans over the past few weeks, because we knew we were doing it earlier. But, since the injury to Trey Lathan, those moments where we had been pressuring the passer or getting TFLs had been few and far between. And in this game, we saw that happen again. And the secondary made plays, because of that and because of the quarterback pressures also. And Beanie's one of those guys that continues to make those plays, Timothy. So great point there. West by God 304, appreciate you as always, man, tuning in and chiming in. He says the last two games have felt like the glory days. Couldn't agree with that more. It really has. I think that there was also a stat later in this game that was brought up. Last game, I believe it was 286 yards, if I'm not mistaken, that West Virginia rushed for against UCF. West Virginia runs for over 300 yards in this game against BYU. So the stat that they provided later in the broadcast was it's the first time since 2008 that West Virginia has had back-to-back games with over 275 yards rushing. So, that right there tells you, reference to the glory days in and of itself there when you bring up, 2008. And I think when you look at this West Virginia rushing offense, it certainly gives you those vibes when you're seeing what C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White are doing, especially when you got a running quarterback back there in Garrett Green, making it all go. So orchestrating the whole thing. And I definitely think it can give you those vibes. And that's something I talked about last week. And, you can repeat it here again this week. And it's on one of these DVDs here behind me. I believe it was the Stay Humble, Stay Hungry one. You're talking about the glory days, the 2006 DVD. And after a game in the post game, Coach Rod's talking to the team and he says, "Do you know how many yards we rushed for today?" And he says, 300. He said that means that they know that the run's coming and it's still getting there. And West Virginia today can say that exact same thing. So, indeed, a lot of these past couple games here have felt like the glory days with the way West Virginia's been able to run the football, and hopefully they're able to do that, moving forward. And if so, they can have, success yet again over these final 3 games. And we can be talking about the most successful West Virginia football season we've had in, many years, and definitely looking like it's going to be the most successful season of the Neil Brown era already right now. So it's great to see, man. And I love that point there, West by God 304 for sure. And I appreciate everyone here tuning in and chiming in. Catch up here some more of my notes, and then I'll touch up on some more of y'all's comments as well as we continue throughout. Drop your thoughts on the game there in the chat or the remainder of West Virginia's football season, anything you got there, and we'll touch up on your all's comments as we continue throughout the stream here. All right. Continuing on, following the first drive for West Virginia, BYU took a shot on their first play from scrimmage, kind of surprising with the backup quarterback and Retzlaff in there, but didn't work out. But you do get the defensive pass interference call on Malachi Ruffin on the first play there from BYU. BYU tries to, replicate what West Virginia did on their first drive as the Mountaineers had a fourth down conversion that I talked about there earlier. But BYU can't do that. They go on 4th and 2. Can't convert. Sean Martin gets the penetration. Jared Bartlett cleans it up with the TFL there to stop BYU short on 4th and 2. First turnover on downs that the West Virginia defense would force in this game, but it would continue to be a theme throughout this game. West Virginia gets the ball back outside zone to Jaheim White off the same end around look that they showcased on the very first play of the game to Rodney Gallagher III. And I like that. That's something I've talked about with the, game planning this season with the play designs for the West Virginia offenses. They've done a great job of showing the same looks of things they've been doing consistently throughout this season, but then having different plays to go off of that look. And in this game, they showed that just, from the first series to the second series. Very first play of the game was an end around to Rodney Gallagher III that I talked about there. Then West Virginia breaks out on the second series. That looks like it's going to be that exact same look, but he fakes the end around handoff, spins back around and hands it to Jaheim White. And it's just a, traditional outside zone with a little bit of eye candy there, but it really opens things up, and thought it had some good plays with that. And then they also had a Garrett Green run designed off of that same look, and even a pass play that they would hit later on in the game. So good design there for West Virginia. But this would be the Traylon Ray drive here. He would break out on this second drive for the Mountaineers. And, it just goes to show the potential of this West Virginia offense, that all of these guys that are not all of these guys, but the majority of these guys that are making plays are underclassmen. When you look at Jaheim White, a true freshman, Traylon Ray, a true freshman, CJ Donaldson, a sophomore. So it's definitely some guys that will still be around for the Mountaineers, in the future, knock on wood. But with the Traylon Ray show beginning on this drive, it would end up, of course, with 3 catches for 42 yards for him, those being a screen to him and then a post to him that set up 1st and goal. And then they would hit him again, and he would get down to the 1-yard line. Actually would get knocked into the end zone, but they would blow the play dead, saying they stopped his forward progress before he would get knocked into the end zone. So didn't get the touchdown, but it would be a touchdown for CJ Donaldson on the very next play. And then how about on the subsequent kickoff? Thought that this was big. You see the true freshman running back for the Mountaineers that hasn't really got on the field too much in the backfield, as West Virginia has that deep rotation, but he's a guy that they're really excited about for the future. And that's DJ Oliver, the 240-pound running back that has great speed to go along with that size, getting down on kickoff and making a play there. Great special teams tackle to pin BYU back at their own 16-yard line. Awesome play there from another true freshman. And then later on in that drive, a Lee Cobra pressure on 3rd down leads to an Aubrey Burks pass breakup and another BYU punt on their second possession of the game. And then CJ would start West Virginia's next drive with a 23-yard run, but WVU would bog down and unfortunately have to punt for the first time in the game there nearing the end of the first quarter. So that's kind of all the notes I have on the first quarter there. I'll catch up on my second quarter notes here momentarily. Want to touch up on some of your all's comments here. Before I get there, James Blankenship says we're bowl eligible now. Indeed, we are, James. Happy to see it, especially this early. First week in November, already being bowl eligible. Been a long time, it feels like, since we've been able to say that as West Virginia fans. So you love it. You love it, man. And then next up, we got I just lost my place. Daggone. I hate it when that chat moves and you're about to click on something and it scrolls by, of course. Kenny says, glad to see Rodney do something this week again. Absolutely. And they continue to, use him with this jet sweep action. He's almost like another running back for the Mountaineers, especially with his shiftiness. But I would love to see them, target him downfield a little bit more. You saw it a couple times in this game. One of the plays got called back because of an eligible man downfield. They would go back to him a couple plays later, but it was still off that jet sweep motion and then him getting up the rail. I can only really think of one time that they targeted him downfield this season, and it was a beautiful out and up route that he ran in a game, and the throw was just slightly off, but he had completely burned his man, and it should have been a touchdown. And I would love to see us, go back to a little bit of that and maybe get him involved in the downfield passing game, but can't complain too much when they're utilizing him the way that they're using him. It's working out, especially when West Virginia's offense is performing the way that they are. Anything that, you bring up is just kind of nitpicking at this point. So just really love Rodney Gallagher and want to see him, continue to be more involved, and glad to see him get involved this week as well, Kenny, for sure. For sure. Matt Silas says he really wants to see Rodney get his touchdown. He's a great player. Right? It's coming. It's coming, Silas. And I think, Jaheim White's obviously had touchdowns, but I think he's very close to breaking a long touchdown run. I'm talking, 50 plus yarder. He was, right on the cusp of it a couple times in this game, even. So I would not be surprised to see it happen in the near future for sure. Kenny says, what about the contested catch for Devin Carter? Hey, that was impressive. Looked like West Virginia wasn't going to get anything out of that later drive, which, of course, I'll get to that here momentarily. I believe that was in the second quarter, which I'm going to get to my notes from the second quarter here in a second. But that was awesome to see, especially when a lot of people harped on him because of the way, the last game ended. He had some really great catches for the Mountaineers. I believe all three of the catches that he had in the previous game against UCF were all for conversions on third downs for the Mountaineers, but people were kind of harping on the negative side because he ended the game with a couple of drops. But I thought he had a bit of a bounce back in this one, especially going up and getting that, tough catch that he did get there, and then would follow it up with another good catch a few plays later as well, Kenny. So, yeah, talk about that here more in a minute, but liked what I saw from Devin Carter in this game. Awesome all-around game for the ears. Ground game looks unstoppable, says James Blankenship. Agreed. It looks very good. Looks very good. Going to have a tough test against Oklahoma next week. They did a good job against Ollie Gordon, which I know is weird to say when he had, what did he have, over 130, 140 rushing yards, maybe even 150, but it's a guy that had over 250 rushing yards in the past two games. So really, Alan Bowman was killing Oklahoma today. I thought Alan Bowman played phenomenal for Oklahoma State, but West Virginia's really shown that they've been able to run the football on basically anyone they've played this season, especially when they've had their offensive line at full strength, which, fingers crossed, I'm hoping they can have next week. Hopefully we can see the return of Doug Nestor, who missed this game for the Mountaineers, but even if not, it looks like they're going to be able to run the football. I like seeing the games where the 2s and 3s get reps, says Greg Adams. Indeed, man. And wasn't something I was expecting to see going into this one, but definitely got to see that late in the game. Saw some young faces in on the West Virginia defense getting some action. And then, of course, you get Nico in late in the game for the Mountaineers, along with reserve, offensive linemen. I saw Bryce Biggs in there. Unfortunately, he went down. Looked like a leg injury for him. Hope he's all right moving forward. You hate to see it when the reserves do get in. Something silly like an injury happen. Hopefully, nothing that'll harm him long term. But you also got to see Brandon Yates get some work snapping the football, which is nice to see as well. He's been working on that, throughout the offseason and at times when West Virginia has had reps with those backups. So, yeah, definitely love to see those backups get some reps for sure. I'm sure he'll have it up pretty quick, though, Greg. He usually does a good job getting it up pretty quick after the wins. I'd say it'll be later tonight or very early in the morning, for sure. Timothy Green says he got what he asked for, which was tight end play. Hey, how about that? How about that touchdown? I'll get to that here in a minute. That was very impressive from Cole Taylor there. Their auto, yes, it does. They'll have a bowl game at the end of the season, regardless now, even if they were to, knock on wood, don't want to even present it as a possibility that they could lose out or something crazy like that. But they've got their sixth win now, so they're heading to a bowl game at the end of the season, regardless of any more of the outcomes of the other games. But we're hoping to see them win as many of these final three as possible. Would love to see us, finish 9-3. That'd be awesome, but 8-4 is not too bad either. We'll see how things shake out in Norman next week, and of course against Cincinnati and Baylor as well. Still got to win these few games, hopefully, but definitely they're bowl eligible. Otto, they guarantees them a bowl. Nick DTV says overall dominating performance. The game kind of remind me of the 2018 Baylor game. We beat them 56-6 with ease. Hey, Nick D, that's so funny that you brought that up, man, because I was thinking of that exact same game with the way that we started this one against BYU. I believe that was a night game as well that season. I want to say that might have been a weeknight though, but I could be wrong. I can't remember. But it was definitely a night game because I remember we got off to a super fast start in that game. I remember, a fake jet sweep to Gary Jennings, then him going up the rail wide open, uncovered for a touchdown, and things just kind of exploding from there. I think they got off 28-0 start in that game, and of course that was the one late in the game when Jack Allison would come in, and throw that touchdown and would create that West Virginia meme forever with him, doing the point and the wink. Uh, Still goes around, the one positive thing that came out of his career was that meme, I think, that West Virginia fans will remember him for. But very reminiscent of that performance for me as well, and definitely the last time that we probably saw West Virginia dominate a Power 5 FBS opponent, and certainly a conference opponent, was way back like that in 2018. And West Virginia's offense is really clicking on all cylinders right now, and it's happening at the perfect time as West Virginia's playing meaningful football games here in November and needing that offense to continue to play well if they want to win some of these. But it's clicking right now, certainly, and I agree. It really was reminiscent of that performance here, and appreciate that comment from Nick D. And appreciate everyone else that's tuning in and chiming in here to the West Virginia Post Game on the Voice of College Football channel. Ask that you subscribe here if you are on the West Virginia Voice of College Football channel, or hop over to the Big 12 Voice of College Football channel. Subscribe there as well. We're simulcasting on both of those. Continue to drop your thoughts there in the chat. We'll catch up on those throughout the stream. And if you haven't already, take a second, scroll your mouse over, move your thumb, hit that little thumbs up button, that little like. It'll help us a ton, helps this video hit the YouTube algorithm. Let me continue on with my notes now as we move into the second quarter. Of course, in between the first and second quarters, the Mountaineers would retire the number of the great Chuck Howley. The 66 will forever be retired for the Mountaineers, following Jaquay Hubbard, wearing it to wind out his Mountaineer career. Then no one else will be wearing that number, and great to see him honored, of course. Now, he was also inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame here recently, the Pro Football Hall of Fame there. But getting into the second quarter, BYU goes forward on 4th and 2 again at the West Virginia 35, and West Virginia holds yet again another turnover on downs forced by the West Virginia defense. You would get one of the pass breakups there by Beanie Bishop as him and Anthony Wilson kind of met at the receiver and sandwiched him there, forced him to not be able to catch that football. West Virginia gets the football back, and Jaheim White explodes outside zone to the left, where West Virginia's had such success, running that play with Wyatt Milam, the left tackle, setting that edge, and Jaheim White gets a 32-yard run on the first play of the drive for West Virginia. Then they go right back to Jaheim White again, and he picks up 17 more, just continuing to be impressive, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the stream. That guy's just so explosive and brings a different dimension to the West Virginia backfield that they haven't had, in quite some time. Moving on here into the second quarter, that drive unfortunately would stall out for West Virginia when it looked like they were going to, go in yet again for another touchdown. And a lot of that is because, 3 penalties on that one possession, a hold, and 2 false starts. And unfortunately, that would be a theme in this game. I talked about it a little bit earlier. West Virginia had double-digit penalties in this game, I believe. At one point, they threw up a stat that it might have been the most penalties called in an FBS game this season. I believe I made a note of it when we get to that point. But unfortunately, a few of those penalties committed by the Mountaineers killed this drive. It stalls out, and Michael Hayes would be counted on to hit a field goal from a little bit of distance, a 46-yarder. But he's been so consistent this season, and probably the most underrated transfer that West Virginia brought in, Following this kick, he would be 10 of 11 on field goals. By the end of this football game, he'll hit a couple more. So right now he's 12 of 13 on his field goal attempts this year. And the one miss that he has, he actually made that kick, and then it got backed up 5 yards because of a false start penalty, and it was 55 yards then, and he just barely missed it. So 12 of 13 on the year for Michael Hayes. He's done a great job kicking field goals for the Mountaineers this year. When West Virginia got back on defense there in the second quarter, you get Tommy Y. Durage with a TFL that he teamed up for with Lee Koba there. And then later again in that same drive, Lee Koba would get another TFL on a 2nd and 3 play, which would be followed by an Anthony Wilson TFL as he blew up a screenplay. TFL's going all around for the Mountaineers in this game, as I said earlier. He blew up a 3rd down screen attempt from BYU and forced another BYU punt. And then you go back to Jaheim White again on West Virginia's next drive, 3 straight carries. He gains 14 yards, 7 yards, and then 12 yards. And that would put him over 100 yards rushing already in the game. And we were still at the midway point in the second quarter right there when Jaheim White was going off at that point. Also on this drive, I thought it was pretty interesting. We talked a little bit earlier in the season about Garrett Green trying to learn to be better with the feet first slide. And I think he's definitely learned a good bit of how to do that effectively, because on that drive, he would, slide at the perfect time, and it would draw 2 late hit penalties from BYU, who would hit him as he was trying to slide there. And that really allowed West Virginia's drive to continue a couple of times, in which Garrett Green on 3rd and 9 would close the drive by hitting Preston Fox, who goes up and grabbed it, man. An impressive catch by Preston Fox. I believe someone in here made a comment about it earlier. I can't quite find it now in the comments, I don't think, but it was an awesome catch by Preston Fox to go up and grab down. There it is. It was Kenny. What about that one catch from Preston Fox? Yeah, one of the better catches of the game, if not the best catch of the game, was Preston Fox's touchdown catch there from Garrett Green. And then you get another big play when BYU gets the ball back. And this is one that I touched on a little bit earlier. BYU was finally putting a drive together. This was actually, a 22-yard pass play for them, and it looks like they were going to be in the West Virginia red zone. But instead, you get multiple players merging on the tackler. You get a bit of a gang tackle going on, and while it's happening, Aubrey Burks reaches in, completely, rips the football away. And not only does he steal the football away, but he recovers the fumble himself. Awesome play there by Aubrey Burks that really, turned the tide when it looked like BYU was going to go in and score there in the second quarter. And, fortunately for West Virginia, Aubrey Burks makes a game-changing play there that continues the strong first half that West Virginia would have there, despite the fact that they had, 9 first-half penalties. So, the positive side, I guess, for West Virginia is they cleaned it up in the second half. I think they only had 1 or 2 in the second half then, but 9 in the first half for West Virginia is unacceptable moving forward. Going to have to clean that up. 5 false starts, 3 holds, and a defensive pass interference in the first half. But, more positively, West Virginia, we know the record when they run for over 200 yards as a team. Neil Brown's record as a head coach is phenomenal when he does that. He's only ever lost 1 game period, dating back to his time at Troy and here at West Virginia. That was against Oklahoma State a couple of weeks ago. And West Virginia crossed that plateau pretty early in this game as they had over 200 yards rushing as a team in the first half alone. And then West Virginia's final drive here, I think this is the catch that we were discussing a little bit earlier in regards to Devin Carter. 3rd and 14, looks like West Virginia's, drive's going to end. They're probably going to have to punt the football back to BYU and not get any points here to end the half. But instead, Garrett Green throws up, a ball that he placed perfectly on the outside shoulder where really only Devin Carter could go up and make the grab. But he goes up and absolutely, mauses the defender, for a 38-yard gain on 3rd and 14 for the Mountaineers, which would, then they would go back to him a few plays later, set up 1st and goal at the 5 with 5 seconds remaining until halftime. West Virginia would go on to kick the field goal, but the note that I jotted down here, kind of my final note of the first half, was that I love seeing Garrett Green mad on the sidelines that they didn't, try and score with that final 5 seconds left, because that's that mentality that Garrett Green has that we know and love that makes him such a fan favorite. And the reason that I think he's such a winner is just, that mentality that he always, thinks he can make that play. And my only criticism there, like I said, anything that you're criticizing in this game, it's pretty much nitpicking. But for me, West Virginia completes that pass to Devin Carter. He gets out of bounds at the 5-yard line with 5 seconds left, and West Virginia has 1 timeout. They used the timeout, and looks like they were thinking about, taking a shot at the end zone or kicking the field goal, they elect to kick the field goal. But in my opinion, Devin Carter catches that ball. He gets out of bounds. There's 5 seconds left. You have the one timeout in your pocket. Why not run a play? You can even run the football if you want to. When you have that timeout, you can, run a play, take that timeout with a second or two left, and then kick the field goal. So, I think by taking the timeout after Devin Carter, caught that ball at the 5 yard line, you really took the decision away and you kind of had to kick the field goal there. But I love Garrett Green's attitude that West Virginia didn't go for the end zone. But of course, as I said, Michael Hayes would convert the field goal there at the end of the half. West Virginia would go into the break up 27-0 on BYU, and that kind of wraps up my notes for the first half, which of course are more lengthy than the notes I had in the second half, as West Virginia would kind of have it on cruise control there. But I do have a couple things I'll touch on in regards to my second half notes. But let me take a swig of my coffee and catch up on some of your all's comments there in the meantime and in between time. Nick D says he was a little bit disappointed in the amount of penalties we had, as was I, man. That's one thing, like I said, it's kind of nitpicking if you're complaining about this game, but got to be more disciplined if you want to, win out, which is what West Virginia's goal is, of course, in this season at this point. And their toughest challenge in being able to do that may come next week in Norman. And you're going to have to play much more disciplined if you want to beat that Oklahoma team that's very talented. You're going to have fewer penalties for sure. Kenny says, we could get to Dallas. We need a lot of help to do that. Yeah, not mathematically out of the equation yet. Love the optimism, Kenny, but yeah, certainly will need help, especially with Oklahoma State continuing to win the way it looks like they're going to continue to win. West Virginia certainly would need them to lose because they have the advantage over West Virginia, obviously. That's one thing I said on our, CRW preview podcast, our BYU preview and predictions episode for this game was really, it kind of felt weird because almost West Virginia kind of needed to cheer for Oklahoma in this game. So then Oklahoma State would have another loss, and then West Virginia could be the team to beat Oklahoma and have the advantage over them, which, I mean, West Virginia obviously has to win out to even have, a chance to be in the conversation first and foremost. So you got to beat Oklahoma no matter what. But now also, I would have liked it better Oklahoma coming into the game off of a win rather than getting a pissed off Oklahoma team coming off of 2 consecutive losses. Don't like that for West Virginia, but I guess if you're looking at another side of it, they are coming off 2 physical games probably, and of course it's the last bedlam that they probably put a lot into. They may be a little bit beat up, but I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting matchup to look forward to, and I'm excited to see how that one turns out next week. West Virginia heading to Norman, but yeah, still not out of the mix, Kenny, and it's awesome that they're not here. This late in November, playing meaningful football games where they're still seeking to be into that conversation. It's awesome as a West Virginia fan to be at this point now with this program, and shout out to the coaching staff getting us here right now. Still, the job's not done. Obviously, 3 games left, but doing a great job thus far. Otto says, imagine the score without all the penalties. Indeed. If West Virginia had played, their best game, I think in a lot of ways they did play, probably their best game that they've played as far as playing together as a team. We talked a lot earlier in the season about, man, West Virginia could really be something if they could get both of these units playing well at the same time, because earlier in the season, the defense was playing well and the offense was struggling. And then here lately, the offense had been playing well and the defense was struggling. So I think, in this game, you finally got the offense and defense playing well together. So you almost got the, full perfect combination there. But now you're just lacking the other thing that you've done a good job of this season, and that's being very disciplined, playing smart football and not beating yourself. Low number of penalties, low number of turnovers, winning time of possession, winning field position, those type of things West Virginia was doing. Didn't necessarily hone in on all of those in this game, especially the penalties. So, if they could do that and play good offense and defense, they can really be something to be reckoned with. And that's the type of performance they'll need next week too, is having all of those clickings. So got to get the penalties cleaned up. Auto, great point as well. Thank you, Timothy. Yeah, indeed. Everyone hit that like button. Helps a ton. Hit it whether you're watching on the Big 12 Voice College Football channel or the West Virginia Voice College Football channel. And appreciate you guys tuning into either one of those, and subscribe to both of those, man. If you're a West Virginia fan, college football fan, Big 12 fan, awesome content coming at you here. So definitely do that for sure. Kenny says he believes we had our blue uniform on for that win over Baylor we were talking about earlier as well. I think so, Kenny. I think you're right there. And I know West Virginia has good luck here in the past couple of years now in this exact uniform combo, the blue on blue with the American flag inside the state outline helmet, because it's the same one we wore last year when we beat Oklahoma. Bring it back this season for the True Blue game against BYU and winning it yet again. So that's good record on that as well. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Kenny said, love that hit on the kickoff at the 15-yard line, as did I, man. It was impressive. And I was like kind of an eye opener when I saw that it was DJ Oliver, because I know that's another guy that I think is going to be really, West Virginia fans are going to be excited about him in the future. We're talking about Jaheim White here, and obviously, and rightfully so. But DJ Oliver is another guy because he's a guy that has the size of CJ Donaldson. He's a little bit shorter. CJ Donaldson's what, 6'1", 6'2". DJ Oliver's, more about 5'10", but he's, 230 to 240 pounds, but he's fast. He runs, sub 4.540. They said on the GPS units, he's been up at 22 miles per hour, guys, which is near what, guys like Hudson Clement and EJ Horton are, So that's, how fast DJ Oliver's moving around at 240 pounds. So that's a true freshman that West Virginia is obviously playing on special teams now that they've hit this, final game threshold. They're probably going to try and play him in under 4 games so they can maintain his red shirt, and he'll come back as a red shirt freshman next season. But, just keep in mind the Mountaineers will have him in the backfield as well moving forward, in these future seasons with Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson as well. So, good to see him making plays on special teams. Love that hit as well. What's going on, Jackson? Appreciate you as always, man. Appreciate you being in here, Jackson, and tuning in and chiming in there. John Kelly, also great Mountaineer fan there. Let's go Mountaineers, indeed, John, indeed. Nick DTV says we are currently in a 3-way tie for 3rd place in the Big 12 with a chance to beat Oklahoma this coming week. There it is in black and white, guys. I mean, you can't ask for, too much more than that. Obviously, you would, except to be in 1st or 2nd place, of course. But as for a West Virginia fan and where we've been over, the past few seasons, haven't even had a year over the past 4 years where we've won more than, 5 or 6 regular season games. Now here we are, already 6 wins with 3 games to go, already bowl eligible the first week of November, going to be playing meaningful football games over these final 3 weeks of the season. And, for a team that's predicted to finish last in the conference, here we are with 3 games left, tied for 3rd in the conference, and got a chance to beat Oklahoma and have a very successful season. So, shout out to that right there. That says it all, Nick DTV. That says it all. Got to be happy with where we are at this current point in the season. Just got to finish strong. And I appreciate you guys and encourage you one more time, drop your thoughts in there. We'll get ready to wrap up before too much longer. I'm going to run through my notes on the second half, and then I'll touch on your all's comments one more time before we wrap up here on this West Virginia postgame show here at the Voice of College Football channel, as the Mountaineers defeat the BYU Cougars 37-7 to move to 6-3 overall on the season and 4-2 in Big 12 conference play here in 2023. And moving on to the second half here in my notes, BYU began the second half actually, excuse me there, got a little tickle in my throat real quick. There we are. But actually, after everything that happened, and of course it almost completely slipped my mind until I read it here again in my notes, that BYU began the second half with a kick return touchdown. So talking about, things to nitpick, of course, because you got to have some talking points to talk about when it comes to conversating about, this win. And when you win in dominating fashion, sometimes that's finding little negative things to nitpick about. And I guess special teams could be one, just due to the fact that you allowed a kick return touchdown, and it looked like BYU was going to come out energized. You also had a running into the kicker or running into the punter penalty. Luckily, that didn't cost you either. Much like this kick return touchdown that BYU began the half with, 91-yard kick return touchdown looked like it was going to be, and their blockers blew up a couple of players. They had a couple of pancakes on the play. Their guy exploded, went untouched, and it really seemed to energize their sideline, and it almost had an uh-oh feeling. Here we go. And then all of a sudden, amidst the celebration, you see it pop up there, the little graphic flag. Luckily, West Virginia's bailed out, holding on the play. No touchdown for BYU, and would work out because that would allow West Virginia to force a 3-and-out to start the half. So instead of it being 27-7, it remains 27-0. West Virginia's defense flips the momentum with a 3-and-out. West Virginia remains in control as Eddie V and Mike Lockhart, Steady Eddie, as I like to call him, and Big Mike there, team up for a sack on third down there to end that BYU drive to start the half with a 3-and-out. West Virginia gets the ball back, and guess who? Jaheim White, outside zone. To which side? To that left side, of course, where they've had such success this season, working that outside zone to the left. 32-yard gain for Jaheim White to set up West Virginia with another first and goal, which ultimately would end in another field goal for Michael Hayes. And then I noted on West Virginia's defensive possession, I saw Austin Cave get into the game at linebacker for the Mountaineers. Was excited to see that, and glad to see him back healthy. Transferred in from Miami last year. Thought he would be more of a contributor that he has been. I know he's been battling injuries a ton, and that's one of the reasons he hasn't really gotten to get into the mix, but knew he was practicing finally a few weeks ago, and then saw him dressing, and then finally gets into the action here in the third quarter of this game. And West Virginia is going to need him, as we've now learned that Ja Faveras is out for the remainder of the season. So it looks like Austin Cave and Caden Bizer will be the guys getting the reserve snaps behind Ben Cutter and Lee Koba at that linebacker positions moving forward for the rest of this year for West Virginia. And then the Mountaineers would force yet another turnover on downs. I said it was a theme for him in this game. And on this one, Anthony Wilson, he stood out a little bit in this game. Was really flying around out there. When we picked him up, I talked a lot about his ability to, make plays and ability to be a solid tackler. That's really what he really did a good job of at Georgia Southern when he was there. And one of the highest tackling, defensive backs in the FBS the past couple of seasons. And thought he showcased some of that in this game. Really, solid tackles. I mentioned him blowing up the screen earlier in the game in the second quarter there to force a BYU punt. And then here he forces the turnover on downs. BYU targets their tall tight end, Isaac Rex, who's made a lot of plays for them over the years, and he has a extreme height advantage on Anthony Wilson, who's only about 5'9". But Anthony Wilson with a good hit on Rex and forces him to drop the ball, pass breakup, and another fourth down stop for the West Virginia defense. And shout out to Anthony Wilson doing some good things at the cat safety position in this game. Then, of course, West Virginia, when BYU would get the ball back again there in the third quarter. I've got another note here because it was West Virginia's third sack of the game. I mentioned they did a good job, getting back to their pass rushing ways and causing havoc. And Asani Redwood, glad to see him get in there along with Hammond Russell. Both of those guys team up for a sack that forced a BYU 3-and-out yet again. And this is when you get the note, the graphic comes up in the game. I mentioned it earlier. With 4:27 left in the third quarter, most penalties called in an FBS game this year. I think it was 19 at that point, and I believe there would still be one or two more penalties called in the game there. So definitely the refs seem to be a little bit flag happy in this game, but oh well, it didn't hurt the Mountaineers and didn't slow down the game too much overall. C.J. Donaldson would go over 100 yards rushing when West Virginia would get the ball back to join Jaheim White. Both of those guys over 100 yards rushing in this game. You love to see that, thunder and lightning combo there. Continues to really be a weapon for West Virginia, and I think teams are going to have to account for that moving forward across these final three games. Those guys are going to be tough to stop. But this was the play, I saw someone mention Cole Taylor earlier and mentioned the tight end and getting what they wanted there from that possession. I think that was probably in reference to this play. We saw West Virginia, this season use a toss play out of the shotgun a lot of times to Jaheim White. It's worked out good for him for some successful runs. They've also faked that toss play and utilized a quarterback run for Garrett Green off of it, kind of a QB counter quarterback power look. And then we've also seen them fake that toss play early in the season and send Cole Taylor up the rail and Nico Marchiol threw a touchdown pass against Texas Tech utilizing that fake toss play and hitting a wheel route. Then in this game, we see similar look. It's that same toss play look, and it's the fake. But instead of hitting Cole Taylor up the rail on a wheel route, they send Cole Taylor up the seam, and man, he was wide open. Catches the pass, has two guys emerge on him, makes both of those guys miss, gets near about the 5-yard line, has a defender jump on his back. He leaps with the defender on his back, carries him the rest of the way, dives into the end zone for a very impressive 43-yard touchdown. And Cole Taylor's having a phenomenal season for a West Virginia tight end. Probably statistically the best in, I'd say a couple of decades for West Virginia at the tight end position, probably. We'll have to, look at the stats at the end of the season to confirm that, but I know for sure he's probably outpacing what Trevon Wesco did in 2018, and that was the best season in quite a long time for West Virginia at that position. I believe in a couple of decades prior to him. So definitely Cole Taylor doing things for West Virginia we haven't seen in quite a while, and that's the last note I have on the third quarter. And then getting into the fourth quarter here, don't have too many notes. It was pretty slow pace, just kind of grind the clock out from there. West Virginia would get their 8th TFL of the game in the fourth quarter, so awesome to see West Virginia rack up 8 tackles for a loss in this game when Ben Cutter would blow up a screen pass and force a 4th and 21, which would be a BYU field goal attempt. They would miss it from 50 yards out. Then that would be when Nico would finally enter the game for the Mountaineers, along with a lot of the other reserve players. I mentioned Bryce Biggs, Sully Weedman, Brandon Yates sliding over to the center to snap. Saw Johnny Williams, the true freshman, at the tackle position there when West Virginia got those reserves in, and Nico promptly, immediately when entering the game, broke off an explosive run that put West Virginia over the 300-yard rushing mark, their most rushing yards versus an FBS opponent since 2016. BYU, though, would break the shutout. Robbins would score on a toss play there in the fourth quarter. And then West Virginia, on their final drive, would have an impressive, play from E.J. Horton. That was kind of the final note I have here in the game. Fake a handoff and run a little tunnel screen, and Horton nearly broke it for a touchdown. And you finally, I don't want to say finally because we've seen it at times, but I guess the first time we've really seen it in that aspect, coming off a screenplay, we've seen him beat players downfield with this speed, but this is the first time we've seen him, catch the ball and then really hit that next gear, and it looked like he was going to break it for a touchdown. Instead, it goes for a 23-yard gain, and then West Virginia is able to kind of kneel it out late there to close this one out with the 37-7 win over BYU here in the 9th game of the season. And that's all the notes I have here in the West Virginia postgame show here on the Voice of College Football channel. We'll catch up with some of your all's comments here to close things out, and appreciate you guys being in here, whether you watch live or on the playback. It's been a fun one. It's always fun, when you get to talk about a West Virginia football victory, right? All right, let's see where we were here in the comments, if I can catch back up to where we were. Yes, good point here, John Kelly. Last shot at Oklahoma for probably a very long time, and our last shot against them as a conference member. That's the one good thing I guess we can say is that West Virginia is going out in the Big 12 with a winning record against Texas. We don't play them this season, so we got a winning record against them. We certainly won't have a winning record against Oklahoma, but of course we will at least get to say we did beat them, finally last season. But it would be, even more beneficial to say we went out on a 2-game winning streak over them. And I've got faith in Neil Brown to be able to do it. We saw him pull it off last season, obviously, for one. And also, I keep going back to that 2021 game because to me, it's important because that was played in Norman, and that's a very tough place to play. And West Virginia is going to have to go there next week. And that 2021 team was not as good as this year's team. But the one thing that he did use in that game was Garrett Green. And West Virginia is going to have the services of Garrett Green and a more experienced Garrett Green at that, that's playing, the best football of his career right now. So last shot at him for a long time, and hopefully we give it our best shot, John. Wet Blanket says, congrats, Mountaineers. I appreciate that, man. Congrats to the Cowboys as well. Looks like y'all are going to, ride things all the way to the Big 12 title game. And if you guys do, I think it's safe to say the Mountaineer fans and, the rest of the Big 12 will be cheering for the Cowboys big time to take down the Longhorns if it does end up being you guys matched up in that Big 12 title game. But appreciate that, Wet Blanket. Phil Porter says he was rooting for Kansas State today, but they blew it. Anybody but Texas and Oklahoma in the championship game, sending them packing early. I was too, man, and I was watching that game, and Kansas State had that play there in overtime, the quick pass to Ben Sinnott and got down in goal to go, and I'm like, oh, yes, they're going to score this touchdown and win this football game. And they get it right there, within 5 yards. And then 3rd and goal, they don't get it. And I'm like, do you kick this or do you go for it? And I like the decision. I like the decision to go for it. That would have been my decision too if I'm Chris Kleiman. But the play call. I just don't know. It just looked like they were just trying to hit a simple flat route to Sennett, and I don't know. I mean, I don't dislike the call of going to Ben Sennett. That's probably who I would have went to as well. But I don't know. And of course, Will Howard slipped and fell right there as well. But Texas's defensive line's just really tough. And when you got them there in that goal to go situation, that's when they get a chance to really shine. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And they came up with that stop. But it was a great game. I was rooting for Kansas State as well, man. I was too. G Smyrna 746 says need to clean up the penalties and GG needs to work on his passing. Yeah, still want to see a little bit higher, completion percentage. That would be nice to see as well. If you're pointing something out there. And of course, we mentioned the penalties throughout here. Definitely have to clean those up moving forward for sure. That's the biggest takeaway, for me as far as a criticism coming out of this game is got to clean up the penalties. I think, Green could afford to have a higher, completion percentage for sure. But also you got to take into account a lot of the times that West Virginia is throwing the football with him. It's off of play action and they're going deep a lot. They're taking a lot of deep shots in this offense. Garrett Green's biggest strength and best strength in terms of throwing the football is the deep ball. So West Virginia is using that a lot. And when you throw the deep ball a lot, you're not going to complete as many of those, obviously, those 20-plus yard passes. So I think that affects Garrett Green's completion percentage a little bit as well. But I still think, he can hit some more of those easy ones, the layups, as Neil Brown called it earlier in the season, some of those intermediate routes. We had a couple of crossers, looked like we could have hit that he missed, and missed another one to Cole Taylor on a bit of an out route. He kind of airmailed one. So there's a few passes that he did miss. I do agree with that. G Smyrna definitely could afford to hit a couple more of those and would help. But all in all, he's playing phenomenally. I can't harp on GG too much. Yeah, White did have an amazing game, Otto, for sure, man. He's special. Jaheim White's really special. Hopefully we get a nice win to open up basketball Monday night. John Kelly says, yeah, be a nice twofer for the weekend if you're a West Virginia fan, for sure. For sure. Earth Ether says this team BYU wasn't very good. They are dealing with some injuries. They are, they're a little bit shorthanded, but in turn with that, you also have to look at it this way is that West Virginia, when they faced teams in the past, especially in the Neil Brown era that they were supposed to beat, they haven't always came out and, made quick work of that and handled business the way that they did in this game. So I think to me, that's the more positive side I'm taking away from it. Not to say that your comment's not true, Earth Ether, because, this BYU team does have a winning record, though. At least West Virginia, can say they beat a team with a winning record this season. And who knows how the year will finish out for them. They're dealing with some injuries right now, so it certainly wasn't the best version of BYU that we got to see. But the thing is, when you're supposedly better than a team, you're supposed to come out and do, make it look that way. And West Virginia did just that. They were favored by, 12, 13, 14 was around what the spread was when you came into this game. And the old adage has always been, good teams win, great teams cover. I think this West Virginia team has a chance to be great, and they looked like it in this one, covering that spread. So at least, they made early work of it and kind of cruise controlled through the second half, but didn't let BYU back in it either. And that's something that I like to see was them, not only getting the big lead early, but maintaining it there throughout the, second half of the game as well. G Smartness 746 says one thing I wish Neil Brown would do was kick the ball out of the end zone. Don't let them run them back. Yeah, I know and I don't know why we don't do it more consistently, because I believe it was last game against UCF. They had touchbacks on nearly every single kickoff, it seemed like. So hopefully they get back to doing it more often. Hayes definitely can do it. So definitely had a scary situation there to start this second half when they didn't. But after that, they were kind of squibbing it a little bit. But certainly wouldn't mind to see, more boots out of the end zone. And great point there, as we've seen so many great points there in the chat from you guys here tonight in the West Virginia post-game show. And one more time, West Virginia defeats the BYU Cougars 37-7. To move to 6-3 overall on the 2023 season and 4-2 in Big 12 conference play with 3 games remaining here. But that will wrap us up on this West Virginia post-game show. We look forward to talking about those final 3 games here. We'll be back to talk about those live immediately following the conclusion. Next week against Oklahoma, West Virginia hits the road there in Norman. Very big conference game. Huge showdown, 7-2 Oklahoma, 6-3 West Virginia, and the Mountaineers can really make another statement next week if they could go into Norman and hand Oklahoma a third straight loss. And we hope to see West Virginia do just that. But regardless of how it turns out, we'll be back here to talk with you guys after that game here on the West Virginia postgame show, simulcast on both the West Virginia Voice of College Football channels and Big 12 Voice of College Football channel as well. And I ask that you subscribe to both of those. Appreciate you if you tuned in live and chimed in. If you didn't get a chance to do this time, hopefully you're here next week and you get a chance to do just that. But we appreciate you watching on the playback as well. But if you watch live or if you watched on that playback, be sure hit that like button, give us a thumbs up. That's one way you can help us out here on the Voice of College Football Network. We appreciate you guys. West Virginia 6-3 overall, 4-2 in the Big 12. Positive result here, a 30-point win for the Mountaineers over BYU as we wrap up another postgame show here on the West Virginia postgame show at the West Virginia Voice of College Football channel. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, the host of the Country Roads webcast that you can find here on YouTube and any podcast platform you like. And I always got to say it and end it this way, and that's until next time, let's go Mountaineers.